Shortcuts. The four girls were walking to school as usual. They walked together every day, but today they were running a little late. St. Mary's Girls' School was strict about punctuality, so they were walking as swiftly as their legs would carry them to avoid detention for being late. That's when Lindsay suggested, "Hey, let's cut through there," pointing at a large, mostly empty property with a single large old house. "Isn't that the big field that comes up right behind the school?" As she turned towards the property, Helen held onto her shoulder and said, "No, we have to go around." "Why?" Lindsay asked. A recent transfer student, she'd never heard the stories. They started walking down their usual route, as Helen explained. That is Old Lady Abbott's place. She hates it when girls cut through there. Like, 40 years ago, her daughter was all sick and messed up, couldn't leave the house. So when she would see girls out walking to school, it just reminded her that she was trapped in that house. She was so miserable, watching other girls outside living their lives. She ended up killing herself, but not before cutting out her own eyes. "No way," Lindsay responded. "That's awful." "Yeah, so she'd never have to see what she was missing," added Jamie. "So she blames the girls who just walk by?" Lindsay asked. "Yeah, but it's more than that. Some say the daughter's ghost haunts that place. Some say that Old Lady Abbott is a witch, but whatever it is, that place is cursed. If you cut through there, you'll end up just like her daughter." Emily, a bit of a smartass, responded with a drawn-out, "Bullshit," Helen cut her off. "My aunt went to school there with a girl who took the shortcut, even peeked right into the girl's bedroom window. 2 days later, she lost both her eyes, working in the cafeteria. A piece of the fryer broke off, fell in the hot oil, splashed her right in the face, blinded her, burned her face so bad she'd have been scarred for life. But her first day out of the hospital, she took a whole bottle of pain meds." "She killed herself?" Lindsay muttered. "Just like Old Lady Abbott's daughter," said Helen, glaring at Emily. Jamie joined in. "I heard that 15 years ago, there was this girl that took the shortcut, peeked through the old lady's window, and the very next day her dog went nuts, bit her in the face, popped out both her eyes, and she—" "You guys don't believe any of this crap, do you?" Emily interrupted, looking extremely bored. "Shit happens. Oh, let me guess, she offed herself too?" "Oh yeah?" Jamie said. "Then I dare you to go. Go do it. And look in the window at everything. I bet you won't." "I'll take that action," Helen chuckled. "I got 10 that says she won't." Jamie smiled. "I'll go 20. "Oh, you bitches are on," Emily said as she turned towards the Abbott house. "No, Emily, don't do it," Helen said in a mocking, deadpan monotone voice. "See you at school. I'll just stop by detention for my $30, Emily said as she walked off towards the lonely old house. I took their dumb dare, but honestly, I was a bit creeped out by the story, but I wasn't going to show it in front of the girls. I could still see them watching me from the road, so I put on a little show. As I made my way through the yard, I walked right through the flower beds. I made an exaggerated gesture of bending down and plucking a flower, then taking a deep whiff. I tossed it aside and plugged my nose as I looked back at my audience. Then I walked over towards the little window. I was so focused on putting on a show for the girls, I didn't even notice the doll. At first, I thought it was a little girl looking out the window at me. To be honest, that scared me and I jumped a little. But I think I was far enough away that the girls couldn't tell. No lie, the doll was creepy AF. What kind of crazy person just stands a doll up looking out a window? I went closer to the window. The doll's face didn't become any clearer. Dirty old screens covered the window, but the eyes, I could see the eyes clear as day, like they were looking right at me, cutting through everything. As I walked up, the doll didn't move or anything ridiculous. But the eyes always seemed to be looking right at me, no matter where I stood. Yeah, I was done, time to go. I know I was just letting the stories get to me, but this doll, her eyes were different colors. One was blue, the other was green. It was like she was looking right at me. The doll looked old and cracked. Was making dolls with different colored eyes ever a thing? It made chills run down my spine and I was covered in goosebumps. Why am I still here? Time to leave. Now. I shook my head. WTF, Emily, don't let those girls' dumb stories get to you. I made my way towards the school. I couldn't stop thinking about that creepy doll, just looking at me. When I got to the school, I made it in just before the final bell. My friends were still walking, they were late, and headed for detention after school. About 10 minutes after the start of my first period English class, Jamie walked in with a late slip in her hand. She quietly took her seat in the row over from mine. "So, what did you see in there?" Jamie whispered. I replied, "I saw this strange-looking girl." Jamie's eyes widened. "Giving me $20, I said, rubbing my thumb and fingers together. A few hours later, during lunch, the four girls met back up at their usual table. Emily was tucking $30 into her backpack. "So come on, spill." "What did you see?" asked Helen. "Nothing but some ratty old doll looking out the window," Emily replied. "Yeah, that's not creepy at all," Helen joked. "Was it spinning its head around or telling you to do things? Or looking into your soul with glowing evil eyes?" The mention of the eyes gave Emily pause as she thought back to those two miscolored eyes, but she quickly shook it off. "It's a wonder I could see anything through those dirty-ass screens. Oh, and, now that I'm blind." Emily snickered and reached into the air, groping around. "Where are you girls? Where have you gone? It's all darkness." Yeah, we get it," said Jamie. "But your eyes do look a little red." "Yeah, they itch a bit. I think huffing that flower might have been a bad idea," Emily conceded. "But somehow I don't think the curse of the mild allergies would make for a very scary story." Helen laughed. "This one girl sneezed so hard, she crapped her pants in the middle of math class." The girls all laughed and joked about the dangerous consequences of allergies as they finished their lunch and headed back to class. Emily was the only girl who didn't get detention for being late, so after school, she was left to walk home alone. As she walked, she found herself rubbing her eyes more and more. They were really starting to irritate her. She was so focused on her eyes, she didn't even notice she'd walked an extra block over and avoided even passing by the boundary of the Abbott place. By the time she arrived home, Emily's eyes were no longer simply itching. The itch had progressed into a steady burning sensation. She just wanted to splash some water on her face and take a nap. Emily opened the medicine cabinet in her bathroom and looked over the contents. "Ah, perfect," she said aloud as she spotted a bottle of antihistamines. She closed the mirror and looked at herself. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked awful, like she'd been crying for a week. She splashed some water on her face and took 2 pills, then laid down in her bed. Hours had passed when she awoke. The pain in her eyes now far beyond a simple allergy. She clicked on the light by her bed and was immediately struck with a searing pain. Her head was throbbing. She closed her eyes tight and clicked the light back off. She was crying and could feel the tears dripping down her face as she made her way to the bathroom. She turned on the bathroom light. It was dimmer, but still caused a bolt of pain in her head. As she reached out to turn it back off, she noticed the blood smeared across the switch. She looked at her hands and they were covered in blood. She looked at the mirror and realized she wasn't crying tears. She was bleeding from her eyes. As she leaned in to close the mirror, What she saw in the reflection horrified her. She opened her mouth to scream, but only a whimper escaped as she saw hundreds of tiny worms writhing around in her eyes. The squirming masses overflowing as some dropped out with her bloody tears and wiggled around on her cheek. She noticed one worm, larger than the others, moving across her eye and disappearing into her pupil. It was the last thing she saw before her vision went black and faded completely. As she groped around in the darkness, she felt her hand settle on something familiar, her razor.